Lots of buttons. Buttons everywhere. All right. Good morning again and welcome to our forum. If you are inside and you want to come out and join us for our forum, you are invited to do so. I'm very excited that we continue to have this series on housing and about the importance of providing affordable housing here in our community. And I'm very excited that Ray Bransom is here. You're COO, is that right? COO of Destination Home. And he's going to be talking about his work and their organization and all that they do. We are streaming as well, and so we'll have questions from this in-person audience, but maybe some from online as well. So there's something playing. Oh, that's an echo. That's the 20-second delay of what I'm saying on YouTube. Okay, that's what I'm hearing myself, which is a whole other thing. All right, Ray, without further ado.
Great. Good morning.
Oh, you don't need this.
I think I'm good to go.
All right, we'll use this for questions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Ray Branson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Destination Home. Thank you so much for having me here today to speak with you. I'm going to focus the majority of my presentation about the challenges of homelessness and housing in our community and what we're doing about it locally to really make a difference for the people who need it the most. Just a little background on Destination Home. We're a public-private partnership that was started in 2010 by then Supervisor Don Gage and then Mayor Chuck Reed as part of a Blue Ribbon Commission to end homelessness in Santa Clara County. What emerged from that was an organization, our organization, Destination Home, and we focus on a wide range of issues, but everything has the end game of preventing and ending homelessness for everyone in Silicon Valley. It's a difficult proposition, but the reality is we can do it. I'll tell you that I start every presentation by kind of addressing a myth up front. And the largest myth is that we can't end homelessness at all, that it's an unsolvable issue that's been around for a long time. And the reality is we could end homelessness, but it requires a tremendous amount of resource. It requires a lot of political will, and it takes a whole bunch of people all working together to get the job done. I think we have the conditions here in Silicon Valley to achieve that, but we've got a long road to go. At the core of ending homelessness, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but it's housing. In every community in the civilized world where we've provided an adequate supply of housing at the right affordability levels, so stuff that people can actually afford to pay the rent, you see a dramatic decline, if not the complete elimination of homelessness. The problem is we just haven't done this anywhere very well, especially in the last 100 years or so. And here in the United States, it's been really exacerbated by a whole bunch of conditions. Right now we have, a significant challenge here in Santa Clara County. 10,000 people sleeping out on the streets every night. We've got a diverse population, which includes a dramatically increasing number of seniors that are sleeping outside, individuals with physical and mental disabilities, folks exiting the foster care system without the safety net and supports that they need to survive. A lot of different challenges, and it's affecting us all in many different ways. We know that housing can end homelessness. We know that we can get people inside, but we've got to bring these resources to scale to really help make a difference. And we see homelessness all over our community as a result. A lot of people think homelessness is focused in San Jose, and over 6,000 people in San Jose that are homeless, but there's homeless people here in Cupertino, there's homeless people in Gilroy, there's homeless people in Palo Alto. The disparity of incomes and the lack of affordable housing is pushing many people outside and pushing lots of our communities to the brink.
What are the numbers?
Oh, yeah. So here we're just looking at the number of homeless people in each community and then the average per 1,000. So in San Jose, for every 1,000 people, 5.9 people are on the streets. Here in Cupertino, for every 1,000 people, 2.6 people are on the streets. So you see the total number of homeless people and then coupled with, what the average is per 1,000. And I'm happy to share this as well afterwards if anyone wants to see this data. Important things to remember. Most of these folks that are out on the streets right now lived in Santa Clara County when they became homeless. These are absolutely and completely our neighbors. And these are people that have just been struggling for a long time here for a variety of different reasons. The other myth is that people don't want housing. We conduct a point-in-time count every 2 years that includes a survey. In that survey, we asked folks, if you were offered a housing alternative, would you accept it? 89% said yes in this last survey. So people are on the streets, they live here, they're our neighbors, and they want housing. They want a place to call home. A lot of folks with disabilities. And thinking about the conditions of someone with a physical or mental disability that are living on the streets, it's rather dire. It means that they're probably not going to be able to maintain full-time employment. They're living on some additional level of disability. So these are people that need our help, that aren't going to be able to make it without additional support. And we're seeing children on the streets, foster care, veterans, and communities of color are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. And these are people's stories. Amy here is just one of the many examples of moms living in their cars with their kids, trying to find a place. I know this church provides sanctuary to people, but we're seeing more and more vulnerable communities that are out on the streets right now. And we're hearing more and more stories about, once I got my house, my entire life turned around. And it's not a surprise. You provide these basic supports for people to live, and they get a lot healthier. They start thriving. They get to re-enter a community that they've called home the entire time, whether or not they've had a house. What's happening and what's creating this homelessness is this driving wealth gap. Between 2000 and 2015, if you look at the numbers, the top 10% of our community are earning about 12% more than they were in that 15-year time period, and the bottom 10% are earning about 12% less. So, quite honestly, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And what happens for the poorest among us is that we are not building enough affordable housing. Now, you hear a lot of different arguments that we need to build just more housing in general. We're not doing a good job of that. Well, I'll tell you what we're doing horribly at. We can build market rate housing. You were mentioning, Doug, you were mentioning the article in the Mercury News today. The one place where we're doing okay is building market rate housing. But when it comes to our poorest neighbors, people making 30% or less of the area median income, for every 100 households that are making that much money, there's only 34 available that they can rent. And that means they're rent burdened. And the rent burden is going up and up and up. And if you're at this extremely low income level, 74% of those households are severely rent burdened. That means they're paying more than half of their income every month towards rent. That means one financial emergency, one trip to the hospital, one broken down car, and they miss their rent and they end up out on the street. And really, sadly, I think as we're all well too aware of, in this pandemic that just hit, everyone had a financial emergency. So the threat and the vulnerability of our community is just increasing and increasing. And for us, Destination Home, we're seeing that now more than ever. 85% of the people that come to our homelessness prevention system, which is a system that serves the entire county of Santa Clara, 85% of them are from those extremely low-income households. So these are folks that were on the brink, and now more and more of them. During the pandemic, we served 17,000 households. They're looking for emergency help. They don't have a way to pay the rent. The eviction moratorium's over, and they're facing, the edge of their stability. And now, as a result of all that, for every one person we're housing, in the last 18 months, we've housed 4,800 people. It's more people than I've ever seen housed in Santa Clara County than my entire career, and I've been doing this for 25 years. But for those 4,800 people, over 10,000 people became homeless during that same time period. So we're housing, we're trying to get people inside, we're trying to get people stable and safe, and for every one person that we get in there, 2 to 3 are becoming homeless. So we know we need to do more. I told you, housing ends homelessness. It's based around a concept of housing first. Housing first gets vilified a little bit now and gets used in pejorative terms, sometimes on apps like Nextdoor. Housing First is a very simple thing. It just says once you get somebody into stable housing, it's easier to treat and help them with their underlying issues. It works really, really well, and it's got a whole bunch of evidence and data behind it. And in our system, in our community, since 2015, when we really began rolling out the Housing First methodology and support, 96% of the people that we've housed have stayed stable and in their housing. So the people coming off the streets, sometimes in very chronic and dire conditions, 96% of them are staying housed 1 year or more. So it's providing them support and stability. They're using fewer emergency services. They're getting healthier and more stable and increasing the quality of life for everyone as a whole. All of this work is oriented around a community plan to end homelessness. We approved our community plan to end homelessness in 2015 and then reauthorized it in 2020. The community plan basically says we all need to get together and start working on this issue and look at what's pushing people into homelessness out of our safety net. Why is our safety net broken? Once people are outside, what systems can we develop to get people in as quickly as possible? And then, because we can't house everybody at once, what can we do to make this place a more compassionate and caring and supportive community for the folks that tragically have to sleep in their cars, sleep by the creeks, and sleep on the roadsides every night? As I mentioned, tremendous work going on in the community plan. It's a network of nonprofit organizations. I think you heard from Life Moves a few weeks ago. Lots of other supporting organizations working towards that. Government partners like the County of Santa Clara and the cities throughout this region. 4,800 people housed. We're working faster to get, we've prevented 2,100 families from ending up on the streets. We're doing great work. We need to be doing a lot more. And that's really the common theme. It's that we need to be doing a lot more because we've got this challenge with inflow. More and more people continue to become homeless. So the community plan by 2025 calls for a 30% reduction in the inflow into homelessness. It's not going to be enough. That means more and more people are still going to be falling outside. So we have to continue to double down on these efforts and really work harder as a community. The best thing we've done to really address that is you, the voters, in 2016 approved Measure A, the Santa Clara County Affordable Housing Bond, a $950 million affordable housing bond, which includes $700 million for supportive, so housing for formerly homeless people, and extremely low-income housing. It's the largest bond of its kind. Nothing had been done like that before. There were a lot of us skeptics when it came out, and it's had tremendous results. We've built in 7 cities over 3,600 new apartments in the pipeline. Not online yet. It takes a long time to build housing. It's 3 to 5 years, even in the best conditions, unfortunately, right now. But 3,600 units built. And more on the way. We're going to hit that goal of 4,800. And we're seeing more and more investment in that deeply affordable housing, which we know will end homelessness. And it's not just happening in one place. We've got the Veranda here in Cupertino, if you've ever seen it, 18 units of supportive housing for formerly homeless seniors. But you can see as this map, we're identifying and looking at sites up and down Santa Clara County. And we want to build everywhere we can. And I will tell you that every site that we go to is the hardest fight you could possibly imagine. There is tremendous community resistance to building this type of housing. And the arguments and the vilification of human beings that happens in these is sickening and heartbreaking. I was just at a meeting a few weeks ago where 50 units of family housing was shot down. And the argument for the community is, why do we want to let these 60 families into our community and threaten the 600 families that already live here? And it's this idea that the 60 families we were trying to serve at this site were somehow a threat. And these are just hardworking families with kids who want to use the same schools and already are in our community, and we're trying to help. So it's a terrible fight. And what's even harder about it is the types of housing that we're building. We're not building institutions. We're not building jails. We're not building anything. We're building beautiful, affordable housing developments throughout the community. And these are sites that people live and thrive and pay rent and have a lease and can enjoy for the rest of their lives. So, I think what I want to leave you with before I go to any questions is when we talk about affordable housing and we talk about solutions to ending homelessness, what we're talking about is something that improves our community as a whole, and we need to do a lot more of it, and we need a lot more support. So with that, I'll conclude and say thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
As the public-private venture that y'all are, when you were talking there at the very end about building these apartments and building these things for affordable housing for people that need it, are these purely for them, or are they like mixed between market rate housing or townhomes, or is it purely just for the people that need affordable housing?
So the developments that we invest in and we partner with are 100% affordable housing developments. We, Destination Home, we do private fundraising with big corporations locally, and so we'll put in money for like the acquisition of a site to buy the land, or we'll put in money to help with like the plans and doing the environmental and all the baseline work before the housing is built. But the partners that come in, like the County of Santa Clara, they're building supportive housing with services. They're building deeply affordable housing for families, for individuals, for seniors. So it's 100%. These are entirely nonprofit ventures.
Sorry, I didn't listen to the whole thing. But when the people move in, do they become the owners of the property? And then when they sell, what can they? Does it go back to market rate when they sell, or how does that work? The ownership and selling of.
Yes, that's a great question. So the vast majority of these are rental. They're rental apartments. So the ownership is a combination of the county. For a Measure A development, the county is will own the ground or be in some partnership with some other nonprofit that owns it, and then the developer or the entity on site.
Of the area median income. So for a studio, it'll be about $800 per studio.
They're getting you a new mic, but for right now I'll just. Any other questions?
I think what got us into this situation in the first place is that all the cities around here zoned way too much land for industry and not enough for residential. Are we reversing that now? Are we converting some of that industrial land into housing?
Yeah, I think that's a very important conversation that needs to have. I know you heard from Cupertino for All. There's a housing element that's coming to Cupertino right now that's talking about, what lands you're making available for residential. I think we need to open up. I think we need to open up a lot more land and be creative. I'll be quite honest. There was a bill that was working through the legislature last year, 899, that kind of died for a few different reasons. But it was the idea of. Thank you. It was the concept of churches and other places of worship, allowing them to look and see if they could use their land by right without having to go through an entitlement process. Because you have places that have a lot of parking lot that might not be used. You can build affordable housing on that. You should be able to. There are lots of places across our communities. Just recently, the city of San Jose explored a way to create a partnership with places of worship. Some people are calling it YIGBY, Yes in God's Backyard. It's kind of a funny name, but Emmanuel Lutheran is partnering with a developer, Midpen, to build housing next to their cathedral. So all working together, trying to find it. So I think we need to find more places where we can build residential. I think there's a misconception that there is too much housing right now, and there's a lot of market rate housing, no question about it. And that's where we're seeing production. But for the deeper levels of affordability, if we can create space and open up more places for development, it's going to benefit people dramatically. So yeah, we need to be looking at more creative ways to find land.
So you had said that it takes 3 to 5 years to build housing, and that for every one helped, 2 to 3 become homeless. And so at the rate that homelessness is increasing, if the wealth gap is driving the homelessness, what are we doing about the wealth gap to keep a lid on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two ways to address this disparity. You either bring the cost of housing down, or you get more money into people's hands. So I think more and more, we're partnering on a guaranteed income program in East San Jose with single mothers. There are 4 or 5 guaranteed income programs going on right now here in Silicon Valley. I think we do need to start thinking about what type of subsidy we can provide. There's lots of different ways to provide people with housing, with subsidies that decrease this wealth burden, this income burden. So in the most recent legislation at the federal level, there's a concept of bringing thousands, tens of thousands of more vouchers. You know them as Section 8, Housing Choice. During the pandemic, we got emergency housing vouchers. But it's this idea if you can give people a partial rental subsidy that can take down their cost of living, take them out of that severely rent-burdened state, maybe you can give them a lot more stability and support. And the evidence really backs this up too. So if you can figure out how to get more people in hands or reduce their cost burden, you can have a lot of success. I think there are more resources coming online if everything goes according to plan than there has been probably in the last 25 years. So we're going to have to deploy those resources in a way that makes sense to help people. I think locally we're talking really about targeting the most vulnerable communities first. We've got a lot of seniors, a lot of disabled people, and then families. If we can do that and use these new resources, I think we can start getting ahead of the curve, hopefully in time. But more money in people's hands or more affordable housing, only way to go.
We have a question from online. Do you or any other nonprofit work on building market rate ownership housing?
We don't work on building market rate ownership housing, but we...
I'm sorry, below market rate ownership
yes.
housing.
Yeah, so that's actually something we're exploring right now. If you're really poor in this community and back to that extremely low income, you have absolutely no chance to enter into the home ownership market because credit systems are not designed to serve you. Like, you'll never get a loan from the bank, and even if you can get a loan, you'll never be able to afford the mortgage payment. So, frequently you have to look back to find solutions. And one of the things we explored heavily in the United States in the 60s and 70s was this idea of limited equity co-ops. So can you give someone a share of housing as opposed to having them have the burden of taking on the entire cost of housing here, which is just so high. So we're looking at a model in partnership with the county of creating a limited equity home ownership model for extremely low income households and very low income households, a little bit up. We're also working to look at this concept of workforce housing, and can we fund housing in that range of 80 to 120%, the teachers, the public safety workers, and create some housing opportunities there. So a couple models right now. We just got some funding approved for it. It's something we're really excited about. We think it's critically important because if someone has a chance not only to own a little something now, but to pass it on to their children, you can start breaking that divide of intergenerational wealth transfer and giving people a real chance to have a leg up in the future.
So does your organization, when y'all are building these developments, do y'all do mixed use, as in like there's commercial on certain levels and then the rest is housing? And if so, do the impact fees from those commercial developments go to either your organization, the county, or does it go back into that development to perhaps offset some of the development costs that come with it?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. So we fund developers, nonprofit developers exclusively who build this type of housing. There is a commercial impact fee in many cities in Santa Clara County, and that's basically a per square foot fee that's assessed on the commercial space. That says, by building out this commercial space, you're creating a demand for housing. People who work in that space are going to need to live somewhere, and that money goes back into affordable housing. But the commercial impact fees, wherever they occur, go back into a general pool, and then the city uses that pool to fund housing at later times. I will say that commercial space in affordable housing, 100% of affordable housing developments, is a really tricky thing. There's some places where it's viable, it works great, but we're having a huge fight in the city of San Jose right now because the city of San Jose wants to see a lot of commercial space everywhere, and it's killing affordable housing developments because you have a nonprofit affordable housing developer that has no money to pay for that commercial space, is forced to build it out, and then once it's built out, it sits vacant, and they are eating the costs of it because you can't. It's really, really hard, especially in this post-pandemic world, to find retailers that are willing to come in to undeveloped commercial areas. So it's like it's good in concept and it works in some places, but other places the burden means less units of housing and more cost to build the housing for the developer and for the community.
How is the Measure A bond progressing? Is there money left in it, or is it all committed?
So we have about, I would say, in the vicinity of $150 to $200 million left of the $950 million bond. I anticipate, and don't hold me to this because I do not work for the county, but I anticipate that the bond will probably be fully allocated by the end, by sometime in 2023, and the unit build out will follow that, but I think will be fully allocated. There's going to be a need to find a new local source for affordable housing development if we want to keep building at this level of affordability. Nobody does it if there isn't local money. There isn't an incentive. It's easy to build. There are tools that big for-profit developers can use to build affordable, still make money off of it, but they're never going to build down low enough that the people who really need the housing the most are ever going to be able to afford it. So it's a tough thing. You see affordable housing production continue, but it's like, okay, is it affordable to the family that has one head of household earner and they're working at minimum wage? Probably not. Is it affordable to the senior who's not going to go back into, our elders aren't going to workforce training to go back to school to re-enter the workforce. So you get 2/3 of all folks over the age of 62 in California right now have zero retirement savings. So we've got a lot of people that are in rough shape. And we need to be very intentional. And that's what Measure A allowed us to do, to say, okay, we've got people that are really, they have no other options. We have to build housing for them or they're going to fall out on the streets.
Hi, I also came late, so I'm sorry you talked about this, but so you guys you work to develop housing. That's your thing. Do you work with clients who are going to move into the housing at all? Or that's not something that you do? No, so we're a little bit more removed. So we fund programs that serve clients. So we'll fund an organization like Life Moves, who does services with clients, or we'll fund a nonprofit affordable housing developer who builds that housing. So we fund new ideas and projects that we think are going to help make a difference, and then we convene people around generating more of those ideas and trying to get them out into the community. So we support a lot of different activities. So could you, maybe you don't want to do that, but could you talk a little bit about how someone moves from the street into one of your developments? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just talk about that process. Yeah. So we have in Santa Clara County what's called a coordinated entry system. So there are nonprofit organizations like Home First, Life Moves, Abode, Path, and they have outreach workers and they have sites and they assess people. And there's an assessment tool. It's a tool by HUD called the VI SPDAT. I'm not going to give you the whole
meaning, but it's the idea is it looks at people and it looks at the folks that are quite the most vulnerable, the people that are most likely to die on the streets, and then it scores them on that criteria, the folks that are sickest, the folks that are most in need of help. The people with the highest level of vulnerability go into what we call permanent supportive housing, which is basically a type of housing that provides them with a lifetime subsidy that helps them pay their rent because their condition is so dire that they're not going to be able to pay their full rent ever. So it provides them with a housing subsidy, and it also provides them with services and access to wraparound services to meet their needs. So for the folks in most of need of housing, they go into this coordinated entry system, and then they get housed in either one of the new developments I showed you or in scattered site apartments throughout Santa Clara County. That's one band of help. A lot of people are able to self-resolve their homelessness. The vast majority of people that are on the streets actually figure things out on themselves and just need a little bit of help. So in that case, they're able to access prevention and diversion programs where they get one-time financial assistance. Just helps them get off the streets, helps them pay, their first and their last, things that can be real barriers, helps them, fix their car so they can get to work and increase their income again. So that's a huge portion of the work. And then there's rapid rehousing, which is focused on primarily right now families and singles who are experiencing hard times, who are out of work or underemployed. One of the things that we've seen, while we are recovering from the pandemic, people that were in hourly and service sector jobs who are working 2 or 3 jobs, so working in the vicinity of like an 80 to 120 hours a week, we've seen them not be able to get those hours back. So their hours are dramatically reduced. So this income that was working for them, that was allowing them to rent a garage or a room in somebody else's house, isn't functional anymore. So, those folks need a longer intervention, but they don't need permanent support because they are able to work. They are healthy. They just need time limited. And for that group of people, we have what's called rapid rehousing, which is a time limited intervention. So it's a little different depending on your circumstance. No two people are alike. No two people's stories are alike. So everyone needs a little bit different help. But there's a few different things through our coordinated entry system, assesses them, triages them, and then gets them into the right program intervention. Is that helpful? It's complicated. I wish there was an easier answer. I wish we could just give everybody a home.
I have several questions for you over here. So there was a recent thing on the news about what it costs to be able to afford a house in the valley here, in the Bay Area. And in San Jose alone, it's north of $300,000 for a household income, just to be able to get a small starter home, right? Obviously, that's out of touch for, I think, a vast majority of the population, especially for the service sectors who make minimum wage, which is impossible to even get into a studio apartment for most of them. So I guess my main question is, what is your definition of affordable housing? And is there some tiered system for that? Or, I mean, no one's really, to my recollection, defined what affordable housing is and what that number is and how that translates to the general population.
Yeah, absolutely. So affordable housing is a blanket term, but when I say affordable housing, what I'm talking about is housing where the government or the lender has put a deed restriction on the unit for typically a period of 55 years or more. And those deed restrictions tend to start at 80% of the area median income. So area median income, this isn't exactly right, but let's say it's $100,000 here. So the income is right-sized at an 80% unit for somebody who's making $80,000 a year. So the rent is right-sized at that level. So I couldn't tell you what an 80% rent is right now, but we're talking about like $1,500 a month. And it's set at that level. It won't go up or down, it's set. So, you're not going to see rent increases of 10% a year or anything like that. It fluctuates a little bit over time as the area median income moves, but it's set against this median income. And what we're trying to build is 30%. So that's housing for folks making 30% or less of the area median income. And it's a fixed rate. So we'll just say $800 for a studio. And it's going to be set at that time. Now, even that is too much for some people. You know, I mean, a senior living on SSI, for instance, is probably making like $900 a month. That's what their Social Security, the average Social Security is for a senior right now. That they're not going to be able to sustain that type of housing. So in those cases, we try and pair the person with an affordable unit, but then bring in a voucher. So a housing voucher, which says they need to pay no more than 30% of whatever their income is towards rent. So they pay 30% of their income towards rent. The voucher takes care of the rest. And that's truly subsidized housing. So we start with the deed restriction, get the rent set at a certain level, and then for people that don't have the ability to even make that, we try and bring in an outside voucher to support them.
So that sounds sort of like a Section 8.
Yeah, they're called housing choice vouchers right now, but Section 8, yeah. And there's lots of different types of vouchers that are available on the market depending on the individual circumstances right now.
So with those kind of thoughts in mind and those limitations or guides that you have there, is any developer going to be interested in building anything like that? Because A, they're not going to make any money. B, it's going to be all government subsidized, which is actually coming out of our taxpayer dollars anyway, to subsidize the government to subsidize a Section 8 housing, right? So whoever's building is getting double pay, right? They're not only getting money from the people who are renting or your agency or whoever, but they're also getting government subsidies, which we're paying for. So again, it comes back around to how, you know, what is the definition of affordable? Because somebody's making out when other people can't even afford to make ends meet.
So there's a nonprofit industry, nonprofit affordable housing developers that they're nonprofit organizations, so they're not making any money off of this, but their mission alignment, and this is like Charities Housing, Mid-Penn, Eden, some of these are but their mission is to build housing for the most vulnerable individuals. So they're intentionally going out and building this type of housing, even though the developments themselves frequently are just barely in the black, where they're able to pay for like a building reserve or the on-site staff they have, or after a period of time, 10 or 15 years, they start to run in the red because it is such a tight and narrow cash window. So if you look at these developments as a whole, these developments are not money makers for anybody. They're expensive to build, but all development is expensive to build in general. But there is a whole group of folks that are very mission aligned and very passionate about this work and are striving to build these units. And you know, as a result of Measure A, they've got 3,600 units in the pipeline since 2016. So there's energy, there's work. It just takes a lot of cooperation. And you're right, a market rate developer on their own isn't going to go out and build affordable. There's no motivation for that. But if we can create an environment that works and we have the right funding sources and the right streams, there are people who want to build this type of housing.
We have another question online. Do you take part in advocating for policies supporting affordable housing as part of updating housing elements, such as in Cupertino?
Yeah, absolutely. We're, Cupertino for All, again, is like lead advocacy organizations. We take supporting positions wherever we can. We want to see policies that create more opportunities to build affordable in different places throughout the community. We want to see increased revenue and funding for it, and we want to see abilities to make this housing happen faster. So ways to streamline and get through significant opposition that shows up at every one of these developments. We want to find ways to make that occur less so we can get development built. So we get behind them, we support them, we do everything we can to fund organizations that are doing this work so they can help us along. Policy is a critical ingredient to making this housing development work.
So as developers almost in your own right, do you, or if you know other nonprofits, do you have to bid against other developers for the land that you want to develop for affordable housing? And if so, are y'all able to pick and fight your battles for housing that's perhaps closer to transit that's already available, so these people don't have to be purely reliant on their cars, a major expense in its own right. So by a bus line that we have here, or VTA, or through nearby hopefully that's going to get built BART extensions out to this area.
Yeah, it's a difficult market when you're competing for the most desirable land against for-profit developers, because we have the nonprofit development industry as a whole is kind of limited by what its funding sources will allow to bid on sites. So in a case where you're bidding against other developers for land, typically you lose out. So we have to find partnerships with nonprofits or with other organizations that are willing to use their land. We have to work with cities and counties that have surplus land to find sites. I mean, it's one of the hardest things in the world to find new places where we can develop and actually have them be accessible for folks that we want. It's why, like in this downtown, Google downtown that's coming up, Downtown West, the fact that we have 3 parcels there that were donated by Google as part of the agreement with the city to build housing at the deepest level of affordability, that's what they're restricted for. It's incredible, because you're talking about this urban village that's going to be built, and if we don't build that deep, affordable housing there, poor people will never get to live in that area again. And it's a place that everybody should live and enjoy. And density, access to great retail and food, beautiful parks, and then transit right outside of your door. We want to create more of those opportunities. We have to fight and scratch to find any piece of land that meets those criteria. Great. Okay.
So apropos of the comment about for-profit developers and market rate development, maybe you'd like to touch on inclusionary zoning ordinances and the state density bonus law.
Yeah, sure. So inclusionary is this idea that you're building market rate housing. It's going to create a demand, like the commercial impact fee that we talked about, for housing for people that are working to serve the folks that are living in this new market rate housing that you're building. So inclusionary is law that has been fought over for quite some time in California, but either the hope is that a market rate developer, you say 15% of your units need to be affordable. The hope is that they build them on site and that you actually have integrated communities where people are living together at different income levels. What happens more often than not is the developer just pays out the fee because for their for-profit financing, they don't want to use it. We need to have inclusionary policies in place in every city, in every county, because it is a way to generate funding for affordable housing. It, unfortunately, in practice, and we need more help from our political and our elected leaders to push it, but we need to see more of this housing built on site, because that, getting a fee is great, but then you have to go through that process I was describing earlier to build the housing. So it's a long and windy road. State density bonus, really exciting. Another law allows us to, if you add enough affordable in, you can build more units. I think we have to be pushing that every single place we can. We just need to push more affordable wherever it's possible. Any way we can, any policy, any tool that we have to push developers, whether they're market rate or nonprofit, to be building more affordable. Because if we don't build this deed-restricted types of units that I'm talking about, we're going to run out of room really soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you very much.
Really
Thank you all. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Don't disagree yet. Now's when we quiz you.
Oh, great.
No, I'm just joking.
Fantastic.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is the third of our initial series on housing. We will be moving into Advent and in Christmas, of course, and so we'll be doing lots of other things as a parish, but we will be returning to this in the new year. So this is not the last you will hear of housing. We'll be having other speakers come, as well as community conversations, town halls, conversations as a parish about how we as a church want to engage with both affordable housing and how that works for us and what we contribute to it as a parish. So more to come. Ray, when we do these things, I get pulled in like 7,000 directions on a Sunday. So did you say who you were, like your background, any of that kind of stuff? So where do you come from?
Let's see, am I on?
Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm local to this area. I've worked in Silicon Valley for the last 25 years and then born and raised in Santa Cruz.
Awesome. And how long have you been at Destination Home?
Destination Home, 4 years now.
Okay.
And then prior to that, I worked for the city of San Jose for about 6 years in their housing department.
Fabulous. Great.
Yeah.
Just context helps.
Excellent. And that's my wife back there. She joined me today.
Hello. Awesome. Ray, thank you so much. Can we give Ray a big hand?
Thank you.
And we have coffee and snacks inside, so feel free to help yourself. And if you can hang around for a few minutes and chat, that'd be awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so grateful that we have had such great attendance as we've moved back into having forums again and now doing forums here outside in the courtyard. We will not have a forum next week. Instead, next week is the beginning of Advent, and we have an Advent festival. So please come and stay after the service. We will have Advent wreath making. You can make your own Advent wreath, take it home. We'll have lots of soups. I think we're like aiming for like 15 soups or something. So you can get like more soup than you could possibly eat. But we'll have lots of soup and bread. We'll have creches set up. If you have a family creche that you want to come, nativity scene, what else do we call them besides creches? Nativity scenes? Do we call them anything else? Is that what it is? Okay. All right. Some people don't know what a creche is, so I have to just define my terms. But those will be set up next week, so come, check those out, stay, eat soup, make an Advent wreath, hang out. That'll be a lot of fun. Our next forum will be, I believe, then December 5th. Jeffrey Pugh, a parishioner, will be talking about planned gifting. How do we make plans with our finances in our states, especially as we leave the earthly plane and move on to the next? What happens with our money and our resources after we die? And so we'll be talking about how all that works. And so that's on the 5th. No forum on the 12th or 19th, but instead we will have Advent Jazz Vespers, thank you. Jazz Vespers on the 12th at 5 p.m. and a Blue Christmas service, a time of reflection and reflection for those we have lost, and a time of contemplation on December 19th at 5 p.m. Then, of course, we're moving into Christmas from there. So that's enough for now. Thank you so much. Continue to hang out, grab some more coffee, some cookies. The grapes are particularly good today. I recommend the grapes. Thanks for being here.